Welcome to Cirrius Talk. I'm your host, Greg Banks. Joining us today, I have Will Saleh, Solution Architect on Team Delta. Will has been pivotal to much of the success at Cirrius over the past 5 years, and he's widely respected amongst clients and colleagues alike. Look forward to discussing his journey and his role here at Cirrius. Thanks for joining us today. Let's dive right in. Will Saleh, welcome to Cirrius Talk. Good to have you on here, man. It's just thinking about getting ready for this episode. You were one of the first people I met when I got here. In fact, you were doing my job when I got here. So we had a lot of ways to cross paths, but really good to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, man. Little background before we get into this. So if my math is right, you've been at Cirrius about 4.5 years. We're going to talk about your journey to Cirrius and into the Salesforce space today. You're a solution architect on Team Delta, but you actually have come through the entirety of the ranks. I think you started out as an associate to a BA to a consultant to a senior, and now a solution architect. We'll talk a little bit about what that role is. It's not the easiest one to define. I didn't count up on projects. I believe you did some numbers not too long ago, but I'm sure you've done several dozen projects at this point over your time here. Anybody in the consulting space knows what that means. You're absolutely one of the most respected mentors here at Cirrius Solutions. We got some feedback that I got from some of your current and former teammates that we'll share in a minute, but the feedback that I heard from everybody absolutely stands to that truth. Absolutely loved by our customers. You're the perfect balance of compassion mixed with technical expertise, not something many consultants have. And you're an extremely patient person with both our employees, our colleagues here, as well as our customers. And I think that bodes well for why people said the things they did. So just a few quotes we heard from employees around the company. Will displays extreme ownership all day, every day. He took over as team technical lead, which we now call solution architect, for Team Delta during an extremely busy time and held down the fort on several projects before the rest of the team could join him to help keep the ball rolling on those projects. He owns things in their entirety and makes sure to deliver the best possible solution. He also exemplifies people are our success. This is another one of Cirrius's core values by taking the time to mentor and teach other teammates daily. He truly cares that teammates understand what they're assigned so they don't just get it done, but they learn in order to do it on their own next time. Will's an essential part of Team Delta and Cirrius Solutions as a whole. This came from one of the nominations for Employee of the Quarter. I wanted to recognize Will Saleh for his exceptional work ethic and unwavering commitment to his assigned projects. He's worked tirelessly to keep all of his assignments on track. Specifically, I want to highlight your consistency, your consistent ability to meet deadlines even under challenging circumstances, the high quality of work he consistently delivers, his proactive approach to identifying and solving problems before they escalate, and his positive attitude, which ultimately inspires the team around him. The next one, I want to nominate Will for Employee of the Quarter. Although we're not on the same team, Will has consistently extended his support by offering me work when I had none, and particularly teaching me unfamiliar tasks. He goes above and beyond by recording our sessions for later review, demonstrating his thoughtful approach to mentorship. Will cares deeply about making it easy for someone coming in and helping out, even if they're not on his team. He also consistently works early morning hours and puts in a lot of effort to make sure things are easier for others, ensuring the growth and well-being of those around him. He's truly an invaluable asset to Team Cirrius. And the last one, Will Saleh is a terrific team member and leader, not only for delivering exceptionally high-quality work for our clients, but also in building up and mentoring other team members across our organization. He's a true steward, both of the customer relationship he's been given, as well as our company. And I'll cap this off by saying you're the only person at Cirrius to have received Employee of the Quarter twice. I think all of us show up to work and we want to put our best foot forward. Everybody doesn't have a perfect day every day, but we try to do that. But I think what I just read speaks to you going way above and beyond that. You don't just do it, but you put so much into how you do it and how you treat others. And having been somebody who worked on a team beside you and managed you for a little while, I can't tell you the value that brings to our organization. So just, man, thank you for what you do and how you do it. So glad to have you here today. I want to dig into some of your personal history, but I know we do shout outs across the company on Slack and whatnot, but I think it's worth calling out your history and the impression you've made on the people you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the feedback and acknowledgement, and it's a team effort, truly, right? If folks weren't so easy to work with or didn't have a growth mindset, then that might not be reciprocated. So it's a team effort, and it's a community that we're building here at Cirrius.
Certainly. Well, cool. Let's talk about your role into this thing. I know my entry into the Salesforce ecosystem wasn't what I would call a traditional one, and I've yet to come across a story that was. But you came in by way of cybersecurity. Talk to me a little bit about Will before you got into Salesforce, before you got to Sirius. What were you doing, and what in the world led you from there to here?
Yeah, before breaking the tech space, I was actually just kind of doing whatever that I needed to do to get the bills paid. So I was actually a Starbucks barista for 5 years. I worked in valet. I worked in rental car. I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I just needed an opportunity really for a legitimate, a bigger career in the tech space. So one day I just Googled opportunities in the Bay Area. I found a nonprofit program that would train young adults and kind of get their foot through the door. So that was my breakthrough in the tech space. And I interned at Microsoft and I was doing as a cybersecurity analyst. And that really opened a lot of doors for me. I think it introduced me a lot of concepts. It taught me some basic dev skills that I was able to translate into being an admin. After my internship and my role at Microsoft, I did some contracting work and I was actually doing IT and operations when we bought Salesforce and we wanted to implement the CRM. And that's how I met Al Huerta, who was the consultant at the time. So that was my kind of introduction to Salesforce. We were implementing Salesforce in field service, and Al, who's our director of project delivery, was my consultant. We kept in touch, and he became a solutions architect here at Cirrius and kind of just texted me out of the blue. And it was kind of perfect timing because my daughter was a month away from being born and I was looking for a new role. So that's how I got into the consulting space. And at the time, I didn't even really know what exactly consulting entails. And he sent me some discovery documentation for a roofing company. And I remember opening the email and I'm like, am I about to work for a roofing company? I wasn't sure, right? I was so new to the space. And at the time I did not even have my Salesforce admin cert. So I think I got my admin cert a week before or a week after I interviewed at Sirius.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty typical, right? The way I came into it, I was kind of minding my own business. Our IT department at the company I worked for had put 2 or 3 CRMs. They continued to run the projects into the ditch. They would successfully complete the project, successfully bringing no value to the people that had to use it. And I just kind of got tired of it and volunteered one day. Like, I want to be a part of this. If you're going to do something, if you're going to disrupt us, at least give us something that's beneficial from it. And next thing I know, I'm an admin and a product owner for a large company. So, yeah, a lot of people come into this different ways, but yeah, this goes back to who you are, man. If I one of these days I'm gonna get around to interviewing Al, and I'm pretty sure the question will come up, what about Will? And I'm sure he'll say, when you meet somebody and they're a joy to work with, you want to work with them, not just for them. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with why he brought you here. So how you treat people, how you conduct yourself, made an impression before you worked for him. And glad y'all made that connection and he brought you here, man. Good deal. So you talk about what inevitably kicks open the front door for consulting for everybody, and that's getting certifications. For those who are not in the Salesforce space, Salesforce is great at a lot of things. Marketing's one of them. But being as they're a technology company who makes software, but it's software that has to be implemented, and they don't do implementations, that means you've got to put your success in the hands of other people doing it on your behalf. And I just got to fathom, as they sat and think about the challenges of that, the more and more robust their program gets to be, they've got to have a way to continue roll training out to all the companies who basically are ambassadors of the product for them. We're one of many. So several years ago, they came up with something called Trailhead. They had certifications before that, but basically they involved going to a physical classroom somewhere and sitting in a class and taking a test the old school way. We haven't got into what year you started this, but did Trailhead exist when you came in? So as you went to go get that certification, talk to me a little bit about that, from that time you talked to Al to getting that first certification under your belt. What was that process like?
Yeah, so Trailhead existed. Like I said, I started that nonprofit tech program in 2018, and actually part of that program is they'll do 6 months of training and then 6 months of internship at a Fortune 500 company. They partner with Salesforce a lot, similar to like hiring for hiring our heroes program. Salesforce has a nonprofit branch as well that works with this program called Year Up. Part of that training program was actually to become a Trailhead Ranger. So I had and Salesforce was just a few blocks from where we were conducting our training. So I actually got my Ranger status in Trailhead years before I met Al, before I actually got to use Salesforce. as my day-to-day job. So that was really helpful at the time as I think an introduction. I think the barrier of entry is really easy in terms of if you're thinking about pivoting or shifting your careers and looking into getting to know the ecosystem. So worked in Trailhead in 2018, but I didn't really work into Salesforce until about 2 years after I got my Ranger status. It wasn't when I was doing until I was doing IT and operations for a company called Riggs Distributing. They do a lot of kitchenware appliances installation. So they'll do like Sub-Zero wool. And they bought Salesforce. They wanted to implement field service. And that was really my first time being hands-on, getting real life use cases with Salesforce. And learning the system was super fascinating to me. I think it was very different than the kind of the compartmentalized use cases that we get to see on Trailhead. So, but it's so niche, right? When you're working as an admin, you only know Salesforce within your internal processes. And then when I talked to Al and he encouraged me to get the admin cert and the Sales Cloud and Service Cloud certification, it kind of opens you up to kind of the possibilities of what Salesforce can do. We talk about looking at it as yes, it's a bunch of data tables on the back end. It's really, really smart data tables, but it's also just almost like a free range of Legos, and you can build it and architect it in the way that makes sense for your business or for the client. So it wasn't until so I got my Trailhead Ranger status. 2 years later, I started working with the Salesforce platform and field service. I was an admin for about a year and a half, and then I got my first consulting project after that, and that's really what kind of opened my eyes to all the possibilities that we can do with Salesforce.
That's a great way to summarize that. I've talked to it in several episodes about Salesforce kind of being a train, and you can get on that train in a variety of ways. You can be a user, you can be a delegated admin, you can be a power user, which has generally no admin requirements to it. You can be a full blown architect developer. There's a lot of different ways to come in. In my past role, I trained probably upwards of 125 power users. Today, 8 of them are architects. They fell in love with the platform. Like they got involved as like, I'm just a guy in the sales team or the engineering team, and I'll be our ambassador. I'll learn it. I'll train other people, and got in there and found like, man, they were really motivated by getting their hands under the hood, so to speak. And the more I told them, the more excited they got. And then when Trailhead came out, man, it just really broke it open because it allowed people on their own time for free to go play around. So Ranger status, define that for the folks who may not know what Trailhead is. What is a Ranger and why does that matter?
Yeah, Trailhead is a learning platform native to Salesforce, so it's their own training. It's their own platform where you can sign up and prepare yourself for the certifications. Also, just kind of learn the latest and greatest that the product has to offer, that the ecosystem has to offer. As you finish modules, or they call them trails, you accumulate points, you accumulate badges, and you hit certain milestones, and you're given a status. So I think they're up to Ranger 3 now, where you could accumulate X amount of badges and points, and that translates to your status. And that's something you could promote within like LinkedIn. So I think that's a really fun way to learn Salesforce. And there's so many different topics that they offer too. So I think it's just a great learning tool.
Agreed. Yeah, the term, I think the first Dreamforce I went to was in 2011, and they introduced me to the term gamification. I'm like, all right, I think I know what that means, but what do you mean by it? And it's basically just a way of dangling a carrot, right? It's keeping it out in front of you, keeping you excited about what's coming. And it's a way to go learn and play around without feeling like you're in a class, right? So if you just like building reports, but you have no desire to be an admin, there's trails for that. If you like dashboards, same thing. If you're great at list views or managing users, any of those kinds of things, you like security. Like, I don't really want to talk to the business. I'm not a people person. Lock me in a room, let me do security. There's badges for that. So a lot of ways to get into it. And I think it's always important to kind of talk about where we started because like you, when I came in, I could barely spell CRM. There's just acronyms everywhere. What does that mean? So anyway, thanks for the detour there, Will. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced? So that was probably what, at least 6 years ago, maybe when you were 7 years ago, and you're getting into some of those trails. The platform has changed a lot since then. The ecosystem's changed a lot. AI certainly is changing it a lot now. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced during that time? Both when you were not a consultant, when you were just kind of a user on that side, and maybe what you've seen since you've gotten here to Cirrius.
Yeah, I think as an admin and as a consultant, that first year or two, you'll hear this term a lot, but it's essentially you're drinking out of the fire hose, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's information overload. It's one little checkbox here could affect all kinds of different things. So it's about learning all of the information there and all of the declarative pieces that goes in the platform, all the backend pieces, the automation, things that might overlap. So it's a lot of information overload. I think from a technical perspective, understanding kind of the data model and the implications, the system limitations, those were the primary challenges that we faced typically the first year or two. So my main focus that first year or two was really just understanding basic development best practices, troubleshooting best practices, focusing on the things that I can control, that I know that I'm good at. And so like things like documentation and training material. It might not feel like that stuff is high priority, but it's just getting accustomed to speaking a certain way, doing things a certain way, and it's getting almost like mental reps, right? So if you're doing it as one thing, but if you have to document it, if you have to train others on how to do it, you're getting these extra repetitions,
Mhm.
and it allows you to kind of familiarize yourself. It's almost like learning a second language, right? You familiarize yourself with it, it almost becomes second nature to talk about these things, to configure these items. So the first year or two, that was kind of the biggest technical challenge. And then I think from a soft skill or like a mental challenge was just dealing with like imposter syndrome, right? This was a career shift. This was a pivot. I was a barista for 5 years. What am I doing in the tech space? Making X amount of money and working at Microsoft and working with Salesforce and meeting with CEOs and all these things. So it was getting over that pivot and hurdle of like, I belong here. I know what I'm talking about and have confidence in my ability to execute.
100%. Imposter syndrome, I think, comes up almost every interview we do.
Hmm.
I think every one of us feels that, and maybe it's because we wear the title of consultant, right? There's an implied expertise that goes with that, and when you're new, you don't have that expertise. Like you're here, you're learning, right? The training wheels are still very much on. Let's cut through the word. The word is basically new job jitters, right? I mean, if when you became a barista and you saw a coffee pot that had 11 knobs on it, that's not what I grew up with, right? So you have jitters there because you're going to be all day long making things that any given person could hate and complain about. So it's to me, it's a label and it doesn't mean a whole lot other than maybe you're measured by it as you're coming into the space. So you mentioned a word in there that, again, I want to make sure we speak to people who don't know much about the ecosystem. You talked about declarative skills, but you also talked about development. Are those the same thing?
I think conceptually, yes. So declarative is low code or no code. Development is typically custom code. So having an understanding of Apex or Java, HTML, CSS. Salesforce is primarily a declarative platform where you can do a lot of things with clicks and not necessarily code. But if you're talking about development best practice, I would say that they're fairly similar things. You want to abide by certain rules. You want to understand system limits.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
That's how I would define it.
All right, cool. I think you mentioned starting out as a barista, which I think is a really cool place to start because at that time you probably didn't think anything about being in the tech space, much less be sitting where you are. If somebody would have said to Will the barista, "Do you want to be a solution architect using Salesforce?" Like, slow down, say that again. Like, what is that? But I would argue that probably some of the skills you learned even as a barista, what we typically call soft skills. What are some things that you look back to your life before you got to Cirrius that maybe you wouldn't have put them on a job application or resume? Like these are skills, but looking back, like these are things, these were life lessons that you brought into this that changed how you or impact how you do this job.
Great question. And I think it really starts with my family. So I was born in Indonesia and I've seen my dad kind of he owned businesses in Indonesia and he moved us from Indonesia to San Francisco to give us opportunities and he gave up his businesses and at the time he was working at cutting up fish and washing dishes and as a server at an Italian restaurant and at a rental car. So he sacrificed a lot. So I learned a lot of my work ethics from him. So that's the big one. And my thing is I think mindset's a really big deal, right? I think mindset is more than half the battle, in my opinion. I've been lucky and blessed to kind of experience in the era that I grew up with. I experienced at like the grind era, the whole I'll sleep when I'm dead era. But I've also gotten to experience kind of this new age mental health and work life balance and longevity. So I'm able to take kind of pros and cons of that and then apply that along with kind of the example that my dad has set out for me. So I think mindset's a big deal. So attitude, right? My dad was always very positive, and it didn't matter what job he had or what role he had. He was always very positive, and he took that role very seriously. And that's my approach. That's my approach now. So,
Yeah, that's a good call. I was just sitting here thinking about my father as you're talking about that and his work ethics. I mean, he spent some time in the army, but was in the airline industry most of his career. And I rarely saw him in the mornings. Like he was always up and gone long before I got up for school. And you know, if the job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. Those basic lessons that we learn from our parents, good or bad, but you don't even realize and you'll learn it when you're kids. You realize you'll say something one day, it's like, man, that sounds just like my dad. I swore I would never do that. But yeah, I can see that, man. And you know, I think one takeaway from that is what you do today affects your tomorrow, not just other people's. So you know, if you show up and work hard today, it's going to make tomorrow better. If you work hard for a client today, it's going to make their trust in you better. If you treat a coworker with dignity and patience as you're trying to onboard them, that's going to make them respect you and be willing to do things for you. In the consulting space, you're constantly asking for help, right? There's no one at Salesforce, much less in a consultancy, that knows everything. Al, who seems to have endless answers, even he, I know, is having to look things up. So when you stick your neck out for other people, that's going to generally come back around to you. So yeah, good call out.
and I think every single one of the roles that I've had to do with people too. So I think it all kind of led up to me kind of consulting. I think one, I like telling people what to do. And then two, every single role I had have taught me empathy. Can you imagine dealing with a Black Friday, Union Square, San Francisco, and there's a line out the door, or a Nike women's marathon, and before the doors could even open, you have an order for 40 coffees and espresso. So in whatever role and situation that you're in, there's always things that you can gain from it. There's whether it's empathy, whether it's patience, whether it's dealing with high stressful environments and situations, right? We have a lot of military folks that are on this podcast. I'm sure that the things that they've dealt with during their time in the military has made them a better consultant because they don't crack under pressure, right? It's a conversation with someone. I have good intentions. They might not like exactly what I'm saying, or they might not want to hear what I'm saying, but compared to what they were doing in the military, this might
Yeah.
be cake.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Good call out. Let's talk about the space a little bit. So I think you mentioned the time frame you came in. I think Salesforce Lightning was probably already out, but Trailhead came about. Dreamforce certainly has changed. All kinds of partner organizations, people like Salesforce Ben. There's a lot of people out there influencing our space, how we train, how we collaborate. Again, I think one of the most genius things Salesforce ever did was create communities where people like me and you can go out and talk to people like me and you. How did you do that? Like you're not going through Salesforce's help desk or their customer service. You're just talking to somebody else out there who's a little further down the road than you. So creating a way for people to be in that space and help one another. There's a lot of life lessons in that, but talk to me a little bit about, you know, what you remember from that first year or two that you were in the ecosystem to what you see in Access today. How has it changed how you do your job?
Yeah, the first 2 years I was really in the Salesforce ecosystem and in the consulting space. I've been really blessed with having some really great mentors like Al Huerta, and Andy Utkan was my senior consultant, and he's very big in the Salesforce community space. They both have always encouraged me to reach out, join the public forums, the Trailblazer communities, the open Slack channels that you can join in. And if we run into blockers, I know looking back, they 100% had the answers for me, but it wasn't just about getting me from point A to point B. It was about teaching me kind of troubleshooting skills and being resourceful, and just kind of getting out of my comfort zone, right? There's a saying, discomfort is a symptom of growth. And I think I had some really great mentors that just didn't spell out the answers for me. And they would encourage me to post a question in the community, reach out to the open Slack channel. And it builds confidence just knowing that this is a friendly community, right? You're not going to be judged, and people are going to be really helpful and going to answer your questions for you. If not, they'll provide suggestions, ideas. So I think them encouraging me to do that kind of established some of my confidence, that this is the career that I want and this is the community that I want to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think one of the magic things about it is people like you that are in it. There's a guy who's pretty famous. You mentioned Andy Utkin. I think he was voted one of the top 20 most influential people in the ecosystem like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe less. Certainly one of the biggest voices out there about flows. As this came out, he continues to carry that baton. Salesforce being another one. One of the ones I remember is Steve Molis. Hashtag you owe me a beer. That's his tagline on Twitter. But if you're or X, I remember meeting him at one of the Dreamforces. He was I think the first year they had an admin keynote. I think it was the year after Trailhead came out. And this when they were really trying to develop that culture of helping people. I may be misremembering this, but I swear they called him on stage. They gave him like a 5-foot plastic lightning bolt as an award and recognized him that in the community he had answered like 80,000 questions that year. Like, I doubt their help desk had answered 80,000 questions that year. I'm like, what do you do for a living that you got that kind of time? But that's the kind of people that make up this space. Dollars to Donuts. Will Saleh is out in the community answering questions for other people. Like, there's just people like you out there that give back and have an appreciation for people trying to come in. And if, rising water lifts all ships, the better that each of us do it, the better that all of us are doing it, and it just makes the ecosystem better. So it's a really, really cool place to work and learn. It's unlike any other job or topic that I've ever been involved with, where help seem to be beyond reach all the time. Here it's just one question away. Right? It's just that they create a place that you can ask it, and a place where people could see it and answer, ways of categorizing it to get to the right person as quickly as possible. Learning how to leverage that tool. Like, I can buy you the best toolbox in the world. If you don't learn how to use it, not much we can do. But this is a space where it's really easy to step into it. So think over some of the experiences. We didn't quote exactly how many projects you've been involved with. Some good, maybe some not so good. Some clients that were easy to work with, some others maybe not so much. Can you think back over the past 4.5 years, some of the experiences you've had, clients you worked on, challenges of a particular project that led you to go find something and learn something just radically new? What are some experiences maybe that you've encountered in your time in consulting that have maybe made you better at what you do, and not just as a person, but as a consultant?
Great question. I think I can break it down kind of year by year because every year I've had a different role, right? Year one, I was an associate. Year two, I was a consultant. Year three, I was a senior. And then in my fourth year, I'm a solutions architect. So that first year, from a technical perspective, I talked about it a little bit, but I focused on documentation, training materials, getting these reps, training end users, just really trying to build my core understanding of the platform, especially field service and service cloud. In that first year, we also were very fortunate to have projects that had third-party apps like Chargent. So understanding payment gateway and how they work and how to implement them into the business process, as well as third-party packages like document generation and e-signatures. So that first year I worked with Conga and Conga templates, and it helped me understand merge fields and syntax and SOAP queries. So that's the technical side of it the first year. Some of the soft skills challenges in my first year was the imposter syndrome thing again, right? So that was a tough challenge. What I tell folks now when we get associates or HOH interns is leverage your position while you're new to the platform, right? The bar is typically set lower. So ask all the dumb questions, or there are no dumb questions. So ask all of the questions that you have, right? Leverage your position. Because once you shed that associate title, once you have a senior or an architect in your role, you'll have less opportunities for that. The bar is set way higher, so leverage your position, right? So that's what I learned kind of in my first year there. Second year, I'll kind of continue to build the groundwork to get the skills that I needed to in order to hold a senior position. So working closer with the architects to build like a scalable solution. One of the big projects that I owned with Bobby and Al in my second year was the field service accelerator. But what are some common use cases for field service? Can we create a managed package that covers 80-90% of those use cases? And how does that save us and the client cost and time by implementing this accelerator package that covers most of those use cases? Managing that product, building the almost like product details and implementation documentation, that was really helpful. And being able to train that across multiple teams, multiple pods, because it wasn't just our team that was using the field service accelerator product. That was really helpful. And then in my second year, I also kind of worked the BA role, engagement manager role for a couple months as well. So understanding the business side of it. And I think this is where I realized that there was value in my people skills, just being able to connect with people, having an understanding that we're all human and sometimes they get frustrated for reasons X, Y, and Z that are out of our factor. But I think the approach is as long as your intentions are good and you can be helpful and be transparent, then typically have pretty good results with
Yeah,
dealing with those types of
for
conversations
sure.
with the clients.
Yeah,
Year
I was thinking
three
back.
as a,
Keep going.
sorry, go ahead.
Look, I was just thinking back to the year I got here. You were in that role. The accelerator was coming off the ground. And the people side of things, like for people who don't know what field service is, it's a product that was developed by an independent company. Salesforce bought it. Years later, it's still not fully integrated as if like something they would have built from scratch. So there's a lot of configuration that goes into it. So to kind of break the accelerator thing down, we've learned that when you work with clients who are setting up field service, right, for a referenceable number, let's say there's 5,000 clicks to setting up users and territories and skills and work types and all these things. And we've learned that in the nature of the clients that we're working with, probably the first 2,000 are really similar for everybody. They may call the work type something different. They may break their, 2 territories or 10, but generally 80-90% of our clients approach certain parts of that the same way because it's how the product is set up. It's how you do it with best practice. In typical consulting, you could say, we're going to charge you to interview you, get those requirements, and go through setting that up every time. We could do that over and over and over again, but that's not good value, right? So we've learned that as we talk to clients, there's a different way we can come at it and say, look, we're going to take the first 3 football games of the season. We're going to truncate them to 2 quarters because if you'll just fill this format, we can set all this stuff up and we don't have to get into all these details. And it saves you a ton of time and brings a lot of value. And what that does is it takes that thing from just bare dirt, gets the concrete, the structure up. So now you've got a more architected thing that you can demonstrate with a client to walk them through the project. So it's a way that we bring, I'll call it free, right? We've taken our experience and built a product that we can install for a client and save them tens of thousands of dollars when the project opens that way. So again, not just the fact that we did that, but the fact that you had the forethought to say, this is not just a project where I'm doing, this, and this, but I've noticed the last 4 projects we've done similar things. How about we make these packages? A lot of consultancies just get down to doing whatever the customer asks them to do and may not go to that next level. So it says something about you and Bobby and Al who had the idea, but also a company like Cirrius who's embracing that concept and trying to bring more value for the money that you're spending. So sorry to interrupt, but that's a really deep topic that if you skim over it, it means so much more than just calling it an accelerator. So sorry about that. Go ahead. Year 4.
Yeah, so year 4 as a solutions architect, I've been in this role now for about a year and a half. So year 4 and 5, I guess. Understanding scalable solutions, right? Having ownership of all the different pieces that makes up a really adaptable and flexible um, process that a client can feel comfortable using. Um, just having more insights on and being more intentional in the design of a solution. So we're not just looking at a single piece of automation. We're looking at regression. We're looking at system limits. We're looking at the user experience. We're looking at the technician experience, right? Because what are folks typically like in that role? So that's a really big one for me. I think that's the big learning curve here in my 4th year is now I'm not just building something because my boss says so. I'm building and designing something for a whole organization that have multiple users and multiple departments and roles that have different skill sets. So that's been really a fun challenge here in this past year and a half.
Yeah, I mentioned a word a while ago, and I wasn't thinking of it in this context, but I mentioned Salesforce partners. And to me, what you just described is a difference between a consultant and a partner. A consultant shows up, the meter's running, and I don't mean insults because we do this. The meter's running, and there's X amount of things you can do, and you just kind of click that box and you move forward. And different projects have different natures to them that allow you to do that. But a partner's coming alongside you, right? It's not you're on one side of the table, I'm on the other. It's you and I are on the same side. We've got a whiteboard and we're designing something together. What I've seen in the last 5, 6, 7 years is like private equity has come in and really disrupted a lot of things where you're not just doing a project to put somebody on Salesforce. You're doing it right out of the gate, knowing this company plans to buy 8 more companies in the next 3 years. Well, what type of companies? Am I building something now that I'm going to have to tear down and rebuild once company 2 or company 3 comes along? So you have to start thinking a whole lot bigger than just that black and white list of actions, but more, if you wake up in 5 years and you go, I think this is what it's going to look like. Can you paint that picture for me? Because I might do this differently if I can have a better understanding of what that's going to be. And again, it's just bang for buck, right? We're trying to bring you value because once you've got that thing off the ground and you're flying, We've all heard that term, like rebuilding an airplane in the middle of flight. That's not cheap, and it's certainly dangerous. So once your users are on the platform, to redo it, so much more expensive, and there's so much more risk to it. So the hat you have to wear in the role you're in is about being a good partner with a client, about trying to, take the task and break them up and delegate those to your seniors and others to get that stuff going. But while they're doing that, you're trying to walk ahead with the client on the project timeline to look a little further down the road and save them a lot of heartache and headache and money in the futures. And that's a pretty big call out. And I don't know that many people, if you think about defining what a solution architect is, I mean, that's a pretty good summary of it. But what are there other things that are demanded in that? I'm thinking security, thinking like web to lead forms, integrations, all kinds of other things. Talk a little bit about you've got Salesforce, the core platform, which is plenty big, right? There's a lot that goes into just being an expert on that. But talk about those periphery things, those other things that are adjacent that you sometimes get pulled into, and how, what kind of things have you learned about doing those projects?
That's a great question. Yeah, definitely lots to consider as a solution architect. So you brought up some of those pieces like integration, security, access, and permissions. These are the things that might be overlooked as a consultant or as a senior consultant, but you kind of bear all of that as a solutions architect. You'll also want to consider compliance, right? So if we work with folks that are in the medical field or in the military, those are things that are black and white, right? There's no workarounds there. So compliance is something that you want to consider. So lots of things to juggle, as well as project timeline, scope, and budget. So we typically have a project manager or engagement manager that handles that. But as a solutions architect, you want to understand all of the client's pain points. You want to understand what their future looks like, what 5 years looks like for them, what 10 years looks like for them. And you have to consider kind of time, scope, and budget. So we try not to build workarounds, but if that's the most pragmatic approach, then maybe that's what's needed. My thing is, if we do build a workaround, we need to make sure that we have a way forward if or when we deprecate it, or if and when a new tool or product can replace it, how can we decouple that and keep kind of historical data, make sure there's a clean break there. So these are the things that you consider as a solutions architect that you might not think about as a senior consultant or an associate consultant.
Yeah, very good call out. One other comes to mind as you're talking about that is we, over the last 3 or 4 years since I've been here, we have been called in on numerous occasions behind another consultant that either didn't finish or finished, but left the customer very dissatisfied. So we find ourselves in a position where we've got to try and support and re-engineer a product that we didn't build. And that's a very difficult thing to estimate. Like when we build something, we know what it is. We have notes and documentation on it. It's not fun, but that's something that it's a lot easier to do. But I think for 2.5 solid years, we were fixing somebody else's mistakes or shortcomings or whatever. And a lot of times it may be if the other consultant didn't have a solution architect, it may be they didn't ask the right questions. So they built what the client asked for, but they didn't do it with a long-term objective in mind. And as soon as you got live and started looking, all right, what does phase 2 look like? Huh? What's phase 2? What do you mean? Right. And all of a sudden, like right here, we're sitting and go, now you've got to pay us to dismantle what we just built because that doesn't support where you're saying you want to go next. So that's another challenge, I think, that you guys get pulled into quite a bit, that this creates a lot of headwinds for our client. So the earlier we can find out about those things, the better. And that's one of the hats that you wear. Going to bring up 2 letters that seems to be a theme of about every other episode these days. Probably one of the more disruptive things that's happened in my professional life, not just in Salesforce consulting, but AI. Talk a little bit about AI and what those 2 letters have done to your life, how they've impacted the job and the way you do it. Maybe what you're doing within Salesforce using AI and how you're using AI outside of Salesforce to do the job that you do.
Great question. So AI is kind of the hot topic button right now, and we encourage our consultants here at Cirrius to leverage the tool, but understand that it is a tool to use as reference. We're, I think, still vetting out kind of the process of where it creates efficiencies and where it needs manual intervention. So I encourage the team to use Gemini, GPT, Claude, and play around with it, right? Look at the different prompts, different prompt engineering, different contexts that you can provide for the AI. and just play with it. I think right now we're still kind of in the early phases of what it can do, but I think we're doing some really cool things with it. I think it can save you a lot of time for automation assessment, right? It can save you time on building the framework of a process map or even a flow, or build a structure around some apex as well. So, but I think my call out here is that I highly encourage folks to not gloss over the details, right? I think what makes you a great consultant or developer are the mistakes that you make. And don't be, I still encourage my teams to just don't be afraid to get your hands dirty too. So I think we leverage the tool, but also understand that it is at the end of the day just a tool, right? You can do a lot of cool things with Google search as well, right? With the Google engine, you can have syntax in there that helps you filter things. You can add criteria. So it's similar in that way where depending on your prompts and what you can do with it, it can produce some really great things. We leverage it here on our couple projects for training documentation as well as automation assessment. So that's been really helpful for us. And I think the more efficient we are, the more valuable and helpful we can be for our clients.
That's a great call. It's my dad and others. Like it's weird talking to people outside of the company who know I'm in the tech space, but they don't really understand what I do. There's a generation who doesn't want to talk about AI. It's the devil. Leave it away. Leave it alone. Don't get near it. It's like the sun. Don't stare at it too long. Interviewing Chad and Tim a few weeks ago, we talked about AI kind of being a helper. It's not a free helper. Generally, in the way you can leverage it, maybe you have to pay for it. But I go back to like thinking about using a manual screwdriver versus a cordless drill, right? It's a tool. The drill's a tool. But if I take a cordless impact and I try to use it, put the screw in a light switch cover, I'm going to run the screw right through the cover. If I don't learn how to use that tool right, I'm just going to tear stuff up and it's going to wind up costing me money, not just saving me time. So, I mean, to me, when I think about AI, I'm aware there's a different tool in my toolbox that I didn't have before, and I've got to learn that tool. I've got to learn what its limits are. I've got to learn what it does good and what it doesn't do good, where to use precaution. And to your point, there's different AI tools: Gemini, Claude, GPT, Perplexity. These are all significantly different. They're all evolving quickly. So if I know today what they do, when we come back from Christmas, there's going to be a whole nother set of release notes I got to go read and figure out what that tool does to use it right. So this is a place where you never stop learning. There's a delicate balance between applying what you know and constantly be on the leading edge of that curve of understanding how that technology is going to change the tools that we work with, the products that we work with, the clients that we're working for. There's a lot that goes into that. And I don't know that people always appreciate the job that sits on your shoulders in particular. That particular role is you're accountable that solution doesn't just check the boxes the client wants checked, but it does it in such a way that they're set up for long-term success for 1, 2, or 5 years later. So great. It's a good job of describing some of that. Let's talk about Will outside of work. It doesn't sound like you'd have an awful lot of off time with all the things you have to learn and keep up with, but I'm sure you do. I know you and I have some text chains about college football and things like that, but talk to me about your family, things you enjoy doing when you're not somewhere inside a setup on Salesforce.
Yeah, I think that's something I'm still trying to figure out. I think I've been in kind of survival mode here the last couple of years. I have a daughter who's 4 and a son who's 3 years old. So I think this is still something that I'm trying to figure out. But before I had kids, I'm a guy's guy, man. I love watching sports. I love music. I DJ'd a little bit. My DJ name was DJ Sleeves because the first day on the turntables, I was wearing long sleeves and I got caught on the turntables. I love music. Growing up, we didn't have cable, but for whatever reason, the TV had 2 channels, which is BET and Food Network. So I enjoy a lot of R&B and I enjoy cooking with the family. So that's what I do outside of work.
Awesome. Quite the segue there, Will. I can see you listening to some R&B and cooking some dinner with the kids, man. That's a great picture.
Yep,
Awesome.
it's a vibe. You're always welcome.
Yeah, I just got to make that commute, man. Now that you are where you are, next time I get that way, we got to get together. Fantastic. If you were talking to somebody, say one of your childhood friends comes across and said, we grew up in the neighborhood. We knew Salesforce was right down the street. They're ready to make the jump into this space. How does somebody start? Like we mentioned, like no two people start the same place, but what would be your recommendation to somebody who is interested in this, how they might get started?
Yeah, I think from like actionable items, I would say do your research, look into the platform. Salesforce offers a multitude of products that specializes in different sectors. Pick an interest and start working through Trailhead. Andy Utkan also has a blog and a YouTube channel where he talks about some really neat things that automation can do. I think he just released a video a couple weeks ago on how to do surveys and build out a form on his YouTube channel. So do your research in terms of actionable items, sign up for Trailhead. And then in terms of, I think, like the mental approach on pivoting, it's going to be a learning curve. Those first 2 years, there's no doubt about it. It's going to be drinking out of the water hose. But there's a line that's like the past should be a point of reference and not a place of residence. So just keep moving forward. And there's another line that I like to say is don't miss the forest for the trees, right? So you have a bigger vision, you have big goals, and the trees, the day to day might suck, but don't miss the bigger picture and don't lose sight of that.
Yeah. Great call out, man. I know you've just, when I got here, like I had been in the ecosystem 11 years before I got here. So I knew some of those things already, but we were in consulting and it's just a different velocity, right? There's a lot of outside factors that determine the velocity of our day, and you just fill a passenger to your calendar sometimes. But also you and I are at different seasons in life. So having some of that behind me, I saw it a different way. But it's been, man, just remarkable working with you and seeing how you approach people and products and whatnot. And those are some wise words, man. You're aging faster than I did, I think, in terms of your wisdom. So maybe you'll avoid some of the headaches that I did. But man, thanks for coming on today. I think the solution architect role is one I've been wanting to cover for a little bit. I think you do this remarkably well. I think the kind of team that you've worked in, and I mean, you've been on a few different teams, but you've settled on a team now that you've been with a while, and the chemistry you guys have built and how you approach things has truly become a beacon that a lot of the other company is aiming at on how you do things. So I appreciate the way you do your job. It's truly an honor to know you and work with you. But thanks for the time today, Will.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, buddy.
You too.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Special thanks to Will for joining us today and sharing his unique journey into and through this space. We'd love to have you back next time as we dive deeper into the world of tech consulting and spotlight some remarkable people, as well as the latest news shaping the Salesforce ecosystem. Make sure to subscribe or follow so you never miss an update. Got questions or ideas for future episodes? Please drop us a line at SiriusTalk@SiriusSolutions.com. You'll find the address in the show notes, along with links to resources that we'll discuss today. Thanks again for tuning in.